This is the Shogun Podcast on TV Podcast Industries. This time we're talking about Shogun Chapter 2, Servants of Two Masters.
安仁様が、私の通訳では信用できないと申しております。私がポルトガル人なので。
What did you just say?
Exactly what you said. I will translate without prejudice.
Well, seeing as you're so bloody honest, perhaps you would do me the courtesy of telling him we are enemies.
Tell him yourself. The Japanese word for enemy is teki. Gesture at me and say the word. He will understand. I may be your enemy, John Blackthorne of the Erasmus, but I am not your assassin. That you will do yourself.
Welcome back, fellow warriors, to our Shogun Podcast on TV Podcast Industries. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow warriors. I am your other host, John. Welcome back.
We are on to Chapter 2, Servant of Two Masters.
Yes. Again, building on the themes that we've just discussed in episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, again, another really interesting episode for
Absolutely.
me. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Again, this episode directed by Jonathan Van Tulleken and written by Rachel Kondo and Justin Marks and released on the same day as all part of an epic event over 2.5 hours, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about 2.5
really good amount of bang for your buck here. Yeah.
Absolutely. John, do you want to give us the synopsis for Chapter 2?
Sure. Blackthorne's arrival in Osaka stirs up a hornet's nest of rivalries. Mariko is trapped between her cause and her faith when she must translate for the barbarian in Lord Toranaga's custody. Yes.
Yeah, like this.
Absolutely. You know, I think this is really good. I think, again, this is really building on sort of the influence. You know, we get to find out more about the influence of the church here in Japan and, you know, in a sense, a bit more of the shadowiness of it. But also, you know, we do realize here that Blackthorne is kind of in custody here with the court of Lord Toranaga, but you know is in effect his pawn. He has, you know, seen what this man potentially is able to do that will help him. So he is being used here.
Absolutely.
And I think this is to a lovely point that happens when John Blackthorne is in prison, and he's in prison with another priest here, as well. So, some really interesting stuff here, which, I think I can't wait to get into with our top Bushidos.
Absolutely. I want to talk about one thing quickly at the opening here, which is the opening credits and the music for this episode. Opening credits very reminiscent of some of the big HBO shows, things like The Last of Us or Game of Thrones, as we see what looks like the country of Japan in the sand and movement across all of Japan. Music here by Atticus Ross, Leopold Ross, and Nick Chuba. Atticus Ross, probably most well known as a member of Nine Inch Nails, and worked with Trent Reznor on multiple scores, things like Watchmen that we covered on the podcast, movies like Social Network, has just worked so well in these types of scores in the past. So a great opening score and a great opening titles now for the episode. We didn't see them in the first episode, just saw them here in this episode. So very cool.
No, absolutely. And, Atticus Ross, really, really good. And you have here as well them referencing those sand gardens, that we see, in, Japan with the concentric circles and so on being done with the galley of John Blackthorne on it, and the different islands, the Kesansu gardens, which I think kind of translates to being sort of dry gardens or a dry kind of vista or landscape of some description.
And used quite well later on in the episode as well.
Well, exactly. And that's the other interesting thing here is that we have it being used later on. But I think we should get to our Bushido number 1.
Absolutely.
Two masters.
Yeah. This is really interesting, isn't it? We see a lot more about the Catholic Church in Japan. We see a lot more of the control that they are asserting. Again, it's not that they're trying to take over Japan. It's not they're coming there for power. They're coming there for wealth and a new support system almost for the Catholic Church. It's like their pipeline to gold.
But it's connected to power.
Yeah, of course.
And
First you get the money, then you get the power.
Yeah. Later on we do, we do understand, that maybe it's just a slower process here, for them. Or whilst they may not outwardly project it, inwardly, and in terms of the deal with Spain on carving up the new world, they own this part of the world, which includes Japan.
In their mind, absolutely. Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah, very, very fundamental to this story and what's going on. I suppose, that is the thing. It's the money creates the power and creates the perversion of some members of this council as well. So that's what makes it interesting, the people that are starting to align with the Catholic Church and starting to align against the people of Japan, that's an interesting story that's being told. And Toranaga is not aligned to the Portuguese. He's not aligned to the Catholics. He's not aligned to any other faith. He's aligned to the former Taika and his wishes,
Absolutely.
If he had gotten his way, the Taika wouldn't have died and they wouldn't be in this position where he's the leader. The Taika would have been able to hang on long enough for his heir to take over, and and everything could have stayed, as it was. But Toranaga is also someone that has to now navigate this new world of Japan with all these extra threats.
And interestingly, we see that even, a couple of the members of the Council of Regents also are Christian. Ishido isn't, by the looks of it, which seems to be like the de facto kind of leader, sort of the nominated spokesperson.
Certainly the loudest voice there, yeah.
Certainly, in terms of the dealings with Toranaga in the council.
Yeah.
You have this infusion of converted people throughout the court here, including at the highest levels. And, the interesting thing is we have Rodriguez from episode 1 sort of getting a bit of meal, some food and some drink with some of the priests and, giving him the orders that he found on the galley on John Blackthorne's galley.
Yes.
And this is where...
And John's aware he has them. We didn't mention in the last episode, but that was kind of the reward almost for him saving Rodriguez's life, is that he showed him, I have these, work out a way to stay alive. You're probably not going to find a way to stay alive. He's warning him in advance of him handing over these orders to
because these also make reference then to the secret base of Macau. That in this world, the geopolitics of it, that it's a secret military base where you have Japanese Christians, Catholics, and the Ronin, who have in the past, this base has been used in internal conflicts within Japan. So that's the thing. Yes, outwardly not so much having designs on Japan. It's like, we're just trading with them. Yet inwardly, the third heart, the secrets that they have put converts to the faith in places of power so that they can manipulate in that way.
Exactly.
So, it's just really interesting. And I think, that's a country level here. At a personal level, we see this then in Mariko, who's asked to translate for, Lord Toranaga, in his dealings with, John Blackthorne, but also to make sure that the Jesuit priest, so the priest who's come from the Society of Jesus, is telling Toranaga, exactly what John Blackthorne is saying, which you saw that Toranaga is effectively getting high fidelity between this conversation.
Absolutely.
And nothing's been hidden from him.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that, we kind of saw, in the same way that we saw back in Uejiro in the village when Lord Yabashiga first meets John Blackthorne, the priest there, there's no trusted translator there.
Absolutely.
And so, this is of huge importance, but at the same time, there are conflicts here for Mariko, because we see that it is this Catholic priest from the Society of Jesus who is translating to Toranaga. He has also taught Portuguese to her, is influential, knows the customs. This is the interesting question mark with Mariko about where her loyalties lie.
Absolutely.
Because we see this throughout, that she is adamant that Blackthorne should not be trusted.
Yes.
Because of him personally. But she will make sure that the account, the discussion is faithful. So we do have the fact that Blackthorne and the priest are quite clear that they are enemies, so this is something that comes out here.
Oh, absolutely. This is such an important scene. And again, really important for John as a character himself, because, you mentioned back in Uejiro village and how the translation went there, where John could hear that the priest was translating it to get him to be executed. He could hear that the words he was saying were not being transferred to Yabashiga. So having this moment where a priest is talking to him, telling him, I'm going to say these words to you, and here's a way that you can communicate exactly what you want to say. Tell him this word, which means enemy, and point directly at me, and he will know you are my enemy and I am your enemy. And I will translate every other word that you say. And he does. To completeness, he does translate what John Blackthorne is trying to say. And it's a great moment for him, because it's the first time he's able to have a real conversation with anybody in Japan. And here he is with the ear of Lord Toranaga.
Yeah. And
it's a massive moment.
Yeah. And they're nervous as hell that the secret of Macau will get out, and but the other side of it, and I think, this probably comes into Bushido, number 2, Blackthorne here, he is in Lord Toranaga's custody, but Blackthorne, the pawn, he is the pawn on the chessboard here. Because I love that in this interrogation of this, this finding out of information, Ishido intervenes, has come to Toranaga's, quarters in Osaka, and is asking Toranaga quite clearly, why you're spending your last few days interrogating this Westerner, and
it's barbarian,
it's effectively a barbarian, and it is, it's twofold. It's that Toranaga has claimed Blackthorne as an ally in a sense. Little that Blackthorne realizes that, but it is effectively because he's using this barbarian to sow division between Ishido and then the Christian regents of the council, because, as we learned from the last episode, he will be impeached when he will be overly exposed effectively then to the will of the council. So that may mean execution, charges of treason, all this kind of stuff. And more
importantly, losing all his land and all of his people. Yeah, absolutely.
But to impeach him, they must vote as one. So he is trying to sow division here between the Christian, non-Christian regents on this council. And it's just really good. I mean, in the sense that, he's claiming him, but at the same time with Ishido intervening in these discussions and asking why, he's like, oh, well, it's official business, really. His ship came ashore here, and in the end, he says, but I'll send him to prison. And he goes to prison. And, it's a deflection of Toranaga so that he keeps the scent off what he is doing.
Exactly.
And it's just really good. I love all this kind of manipulation being done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Just the intrigue of what's happening in court is so good, isn't it? Yeah. I really like this. And again, what's echoing back on Mariko from the discussion that the priest is actually having on behalf of John Blackthorne, what's echoing back on her is, can she be like him? Can she take every word that John Blackthorne says and translate it to her master? Can he trust her to do that? She has to sit in on this just to validate that the conversation's passing directly from John Blackthorne to Toranaga, but she also has to start questioning herself as to whether she can do that, since it goes against her Catholic religion. The things that he's saying may be things that might upset the apple cart, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's an interesting question for her. And on the other side of it, we have a moment with her husband and her child, where her child's asking her about who this barbarian is. She's explaining and having a bit of fun with her child, and then her husband comes in, massively annoyed that she's taken up this position working for Toranaga. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, certainly a happy marriage it does not seem.
No.
Very tense.
Yeah.
And yeah, her general husband, he's in Toranaga's army.
As opposed to a more specific husband.
Yeah, exactly.
Her husband, who's a general.
Is not happy that she's been asked to meetings by Hiramatsu, and so on. So, yeah, really interesting here. Yeah. And I think
it's quite a significant position to be in, having Mariko there in, that conclave. We saw what happened when one member of his clan crossed the threshold into a court here in Osaka. So she's being asked to sit in on these without his knowledge. He wasn't asked first for his permission to have her there. There's a lot of tension between them for the invite from her lord.
Well, that's it. I mean, I think the interesting thing here as well is that in prison, Blackthorne is in a cell with another priest who really doesn't seem very fond of the Jesuit order as well.
Yeah.
And, in this, the priest, is really telling him that he doesn't know the games that are being played, of which he is a part of.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, he talks that the Portuguese priests are plotting not only the demise of Toranaga, in order to have the ascendancy of Christian regents in the council and on the council, but also with Blackthorne, because, to keep the secret of Macau. So what he says is that the truth here is that the role of these priests in inciting rebellion, when their trade is threatened, and that ultimately, he talks how the Jesuit order doesn't care for the soul. It's just trade, kind of interesting, the different subtleties of the different orders, I guess, and their focus or what they're known for.
Yeah.
And so actually, John Blackthorne, in a sense, when he is rescued from execution from prison, is quite well informed as to the current situation. Interestingly, it's Yabashige who saves him from the execution squad here.
Well, hires the mercenaries to save him, then kills the mercenaries to protect that information. Yeah.
But at the order of Lord Ishido, because we see him being visited by Lord Ishido, and you're going, yeah, but okay, he is Toranaga's ally, but you realize that they were brothers in arms in the Korean War, and they discuss, the barbarian, and that the reason why Toranaga has him around, his hatred for the Portuguese, and the belief that Christians will be the next battle that happens, and believes that Ishido will have to contend with these Christian lords on the council, in terms of Ono, the guy who's kind of behind the textiles because he has leprosy, and Kiyama, who is one of the major Christian regent on that council, and is the one that looks to get John Blackthorne, the heretic, executed.
Yes, and Kiyama is the one that's driven by greed, is how he's described as well. Not just that he's Christian, but he's also the one driven by greed. And I suppose importantly in this kind of conversation that we have between the two of them, it's also about the fact that Ishida has already signed the orders for the death of John Blackthorne.
Yeah.
This is the plan of Yabushiga to get him out of that. Effectively, he's like, well, I can do something that you can wash your hands completely of. You weren't involved. I was just in the right place at the right time, is the way that I could say it, basically. So he is aligning himself a bit more towards Ishido, even though he's supposed to be loyal to Lord Toranaga, and they have their own battle between the two of them.
Yeah, no,
so,
it's interesting, isn't it? Well, like, what are the complexities? What's the reasoning here? Just to say as well, I think before we go on to Bushido 3, the other member of the council is Sujiyama, who is also a Christian regent as well, but it is Kiyama that is seemingly the main Christian player here.
Yes, but Sugiyama is more known for the fact that he's the samurai, he's the warrior, he's the one that will take care of business, I suppose. All of them have their own interesting details about them. I think we'll find out more about that council as the episodes go on. This is the central point. It is called Shogun. These 5 are battling to become the new leader in some way.
Exactly.
So I like that there's, in some senses, there's this tenuous alignment of the other 4 versus Lord Toranaga. We saw the flashback at the beginning of the episode to the funeral of the Taiko, where we realized that one of his plans was actually to hand over the power to his trusted aide, Lord Toranaga, where he would take over until the heir was ready to go. It would just all be given to him. And he said no. He said absolutely not. But
I liked how he put it. He refuses because he doesn't want to unite his enemy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it is pretty clear that while that is an offer that Taiko makes, it's almost like I'm offering it one more time to you. He knows that Toranaga is not going to accept that. He knows that he won't become the leader. So he already has fully written down and in place, effectively. So he already had it written on the card, but wanted to do it one more time. Maybe Toranaga will accept it.
But it seems like there's a closeness there as well, because it is Toranaga who is asked to stay when the rest of the court are asked to leave.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I did get the sense from Lady Ashiba of, a royal side eye from her as he is remaining by the Taiko's side.
Well,
so
absolutely.
Again, is that one of a knowing side eye, as in, she realizes that Toranaga is the one that will maintain this legacy, or is at least the one most trusted to do that, or is it, what's he doing? Just to see it as friend or foe in that instant. But it's just, you did get a good deal of royal side eye here.
Yes, and one of the other things we learn as well is that the Taiko kind of still Toranaga's wife. There's a conversation between the two of them again on his deathbed where he's saying, in another life, another time, my wife could have been your wife. The two of you had that relationship. And I do wonder if that's maybe part of that kind of side eye that's being given.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely clocked something, again, even whether the heir is possibly Toranaga's.
There you go.
So,
could be that.
Interesting. But I think that moves us on to Bushido 3, and it is, I've called this a child in the wilderness, and it is reference to the priest's warning in jail that when he tells Blackthorne, you don't know or understand their games, and he kind of inwardly just sort of says, he's a child in the wilderness. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Exactly.
It's like,
another
bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, but green as they come,
Yeah.
And
you hear that from him, that, I've seen people like you being in this prison many times, and it all ends the same way. So
it is the games of the Lords of Japan. And, part of that is information. And we see Yabushiga, once he's brought John the Barbarian to Toranaga. Toranaga wants to learn more about his customs, his country's customs, but also learns more in the Japanese sand garden about how Spain and Portugal carved up the new world. And it was just so sort of tense and epic. You see kind of the anger rising in Toranaga as, John Blackthorne is saying how everything this side of the line, Portugal will rule and has the power. And that word triggers the idea that they are being ruled is deeply offensive.
Absolutely. And also it's, I suppose, the way it's delivered by John, because, we've had the conversation between, through the Jesuit priest earlier on. Beforehand, we had Mariko translating every word that he says, and then he's asked to draw the world map. And then he's asked, and next time I want you to come back and show me the bases of the Portuguese. And John stops everything and goes, effectively draws a line down the center of the map that he just drew and said, over here, that's everything Portuguese. And right there, that's Japan. So he's able to get across in that moment exactly why he's so aggressively against Portugal and why him being an enemy of Portugal should be a benefit to Toranaga, and is also able to get Lord Toranaga riled up about the idea that this foreign nation has decided, without even setting foot on their land, that they own it because they saw it on a map and drew a line down it.
It's almost, it goes with the best assassins of Japan, that, the priests have infiltrated Japanese society and are inwardly turning people against one another. And that's why, I love that Toranaga kind of says, what do you seek? And he just says, to vanquish our common enemy. And there's this feeling that, for Toranaga, it's like, but you're going to lose. All they know are the Portuguese. They don't know about, other countries, including, Britain in this moment. And and he goes, oh, you're just going to lose. He goes, maybe unless I win. Exactly. Or he says something to that effect. And you see the sort of recognition of defiance that actually maybe Toranaga also inwardly has, towards this notion of being a loser, or the potential for loss, to lose in this, in war.
Yeah, absolutely.
And strategy even.
I like that from John. John's attitude is, well, you're not going to know if you don't try, and what if I win?
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost like, you almost think, this sounds a little ruder than it's meant to, but it's almost like, have the lords of Japan been playing with themselves or between themselves too long to understand this external threat that's come in, in the way of the Portuguese, by way of the priests. And it seems that Toranaga has an innate understanding of that, but doesn't realize to what extent they have done that with Macau and this insight.
He doesn't know the details, but he knows there's a threat there. He absolutely is aware of that, and he's seeing it. Again, it's not like he didn't know the 5 council members or the other 4 council members before they were all working together. He probably had quite a lot of knowledge of them, but as he's seeing them convert to Catholicism, and as he's seeing more of that, the connection with the Portuguese coming through in the council, I think he's really feeling the danger that's there. Seems like a very smart tactician. We've seen that from his interactions with the other characters. Seems to kind of want to be one step ahead. And maybe that's the other way he can use John Blackthorne here. He can use him to get a further step ahead of his rivals as well. So to keep himself safe. And again, his ultimate purpose, to keep the heir safe until the heir can take over the throne in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that information, John is retained in the household of Toranaga, so that he can provide more information the following day, but is given the quarters of Toranaga to sleep in. And Toranaga sleeps where John Blackthorne would do. And we have this sort of great assassination attempt, which Toranaga understands was aimed at John Blackthorne, not at him, as we have this assassin, like excellent scenes. Loved just how she moved through the building, taking out the soldier with the little hand knife. But then Toranaga being the lying in wait and effectively a slice and a punch of then his katana as she sort of goes falling into one of these dry gardens.
Yes, very good.
It was just it was really good. It's just this murderous, traitorous assassination attempt from the Lord Kiyama from the council. Yeah.
Absolutely. A great way to end the episode and show the real threat that's there, that John Blackthorne poses to this tentative alliance, let's call it, for the council. Really, really good. Any other notes, any other points that we hadn't talked about, John?
The only other note here is to talk about the Black Ship, which is one of the trading ships of the Portuguese, where Toranaga does not allow this ship to depart from Japan. So it's all been loaded up with goods and trade, but is not allowing it to leave because of the information given to him by Blackthorne.
Yes, very interesting.
Yeah. And also, he's the head of international relations.
Yes,
he's effectively the foreign minister.
Yes.
In this court. So he has the power and the decision making over allowing the ships to leave in order to have the trade.
Yes, you suspect there's more to it. Though, once again, with Toranaga, he's maybe a couple of steps ahead in his planning as well.
It's also one of the excuses he uses as to why John Blackthorne is there, is because he needs to know this kind of stuff because he's head of international relations.
Exactly. I only have one other note that just expands a little bit on what we learned last episode about the bloodline that Toranaga belongs to, which is the Minawara bloodline. The explanation that they give in the episode effectively is that it's a bloodline that leads to Shogun, which is the ultimate rank a mortal can achieve. So that bloodline were the last of the Shoguns. So the show's called Shogun. There are 5 people fighting over for the right to become or to attain that highest level. So you suspect that since there's a lot of connection to traditions through the religion, through Shinto, there's a lot of connections to the ancestors, that is a path that Toranaga could be going down, claiming his bloodline and becoming Shogun.
Yeah.
So, an intriguing one. Again, expanding on everything, this is one of the challenges this has. We mentioned last episode that in James Clavell's book, it's a huge tome and, presumably goes into a lot of detail about Japanese culture from this perspective. And it's difficult to get a lot of that across in a TV show and an adaptation. So, drip feeding the elements that are really important to us as the episodes go on is also pretty important.
Absolutely.
So we can all learn along with the characters, who everybody is and who the players are. Something that they really, again, accomplished really well in this episode. Something that's working so well for me with Shogun. Loving learning about all lead into relationships and all of
absolutely,
all of the different groups that are in here as the show expands. John, do you have a rating for this episode?
I do. It's 4.5 heretical heretics out of 5.
Very good.
Who will rid me of this heretical heretic?
I like it.
I just really enjoyed this. I like how I can see how and why these were put together to come out as one. It's really leaning into sort of the politics of court, the politics globally of something that a lot of them don't know about or understand, this agreement between Spain and Portugal, but also the rise of Britain effectively as a seafaring nation and the challenge of that to the Spanish and the Portuguese, so like this is all kind of nicely sort of playing out this geopolitics of how, the world sort of evolved in a sense in terms of countries and nations and power plays.
Yeah.
But I like how it also then goes to sort of the personal trials of Mariko, and her relationship with her family, her cause, but also her, her religion.
Absolutely.
Of 10 years.
Yeah.
Again, the machinations of the court, has this led them to be blind, to the threat of the Portuguese priests? And
while they're infighting, there's something going on over in the other corner.
Exactly. And to what extent will Blackthorne, sort of how the opportunity, the opportunisticness of Blackthorne and what it might provide in terms of opportunities for Blackthorne and Britain, in a sense, happening here. So, it's all really intriguing, and I just love the web that it's weaving.
Absolutely. I also love not knowing how it all turns out.
Absolutely. I'm so glad I never read that massive book. And to be honest, I certainly don't remember the 1980 miniseries, thankfully. I do remember watching it, but I remember at the time probably because my mum, like you, because my mum wanted to watch it and maybe wasn't quite as interested in it as I should have been, or I didn't follow it close enough because it's like, well, I shouldn't be interested in the same things as our parents. But again, it fed into that wider interest of Japan, really.
It was so much more complicated, though, wasn't it? It was a 5-episode miniseries, which in the US was on every night of the week. And when we eventually got it, if you miss a week, that's it. You're done. It's 1980, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We certainly didn't have a video recorder even at the time to record it. So if you're right, so you would have to have sat down and watched every episode of the 5 episodes to gather the story. And the story is epic. It's very detailed. So I don't know whether my mom ever got to the end of it and watched all 5 episodes of the show, but I certainly remember her sitting down in front of it going, "Ooh, there's that nice Richard Chamberlain in a new story set in Japan." So I definitely had that moment, but we only had 4 channels, so you kind of remember all of those things.
Everyone's knees quivering.
A quiver. I almost called him Richard Clayderman, the other Richard that was very popular back in the 80s. Anyway, I think that's it for our coverage of Shogun, chapters 1 and 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us for our epic beginning of our epic podcast about an epic TV show, Shogun. We hope you're going to join us each week for our coverage of Shogun. But we do want to hear from you. You can email us with your thoughts on any of the chapters to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. You can join us over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. There's a spoiler post up there for each of the episodes that we've covered so far, and we'll have one up each week as the episodes are released as well.
Yes, absolutely. And please support us. You can subscribe to the podcast on any good podcast player of your choice. Please rate us, review us, share the podcast, because of course sharing the podcast is sharing the love.
Of course it is.
And of course we are over on patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries and buymeacoffee.com/TVPI, where you can support us there if you so choose.
Absolutely. And if you want more podcasts from TV Podcast Industries, loads going on at the moment. We're just covering some very diverse stuff at the moment. We're covering Star Wars The Bad Batch, Season 3, the final season of Star Wars The Bad Batch at the moment. A couple of episodes into that one.
We've just finished our coverage of Marvel's Echo.
Yes, we have, at the beginning of the month. So that was a really interesting show. Something actually that struck me in this episode of Shogun. I know it's the shows are completely different, but because that show we dealt with a person who was deaf in Echo, and they made choices of dropping out the sound to show her experience. I really liked in the second episode here, as John is speaking through the Jesuit priest and talking to Lord Toranaga, the Jesuit priest's voice or translation drops out, and we're left with it looking like a conversation directly between the two of them as we're sitting there reading the subtitles anyway. Yeah. So I loved that choice that they made in here, and it did remind me of Echo, how they made those choices when people were talking in ASL between each other, or there's fight sequences, and we saw through Maya's experience in those episodes. So anyway, that was just a connection that popped up. But we have all of those episodes available over on tvpodcastindustries.com, along with over 800 other episodes in our 10 years of podcasting.
Absolutely. But we will be back for more episodes, which include next week as we chat all about Shogun Chapter 3. Tomorrow is tomorrow.
I hope it's tomorrow that we get to watch the episode.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you again next time.
Yes, thank you so much, fellow warriors, for joining us on our epic journey into the shogunate of this series.
Yes.
Shogun. Lots of shoguns there.
Yes, there is.
But until the next time, of course, keep watching and, of course, keep listening. Bye.
Bye.